Commander Vexathari sat in the dimly lit military tribunal chamber, his forearms trembling slightly as he faced the High Council of the Galactic Federation. The scars across his chitinous exoskeleton told stories of battles fought across a dozen star systems, but none had marked him as deeply as the campaign against the humans of Terra. The lead counselor, a towering Xentorian with crystal blue skin, leaned forward with obvious impatience. Commander Vexathari, you have requested this emergency session to discuss your recent defeat at the human colony of New Geneva. The Federation needs to understand how an entire battle fleet was neutralized by what our intelligence reports described as primitive bipedal mammals. Vexathari's mandibles clicked nervously, a sound that echoed through the vast chamber. Around him, representatives from 17 different species waited for his explanation. They had all heard rumors about the human engagement, whispers that had spread through the Federation like a plague. Ships returning with skeleton crews, soldiers refusing to speak about what they had witnessed, entire battalions requesting immediate transfers to different sectors of the galaxy. "Honored Council," Vexathari began, his voice carrying the weight of trauma. "I must first correct a fundamental assumption in your question. We were not defeated by primitive mammals. We encountered something far more terrifying than any species we have faced in our 3,000-year expansion across the galaxy." The Xentorian counselor's crystalline features showed skepticism. "Commander, our xenobiological surveys indicated that humans had only achieved spaceflight within the last century. Their technology appeared crude, their military organization scattered across multiple nation-states. How could such a species pose any significant threat to Federation forces?" Vexathari stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. "That was our first mistake, Counselor Zethkar. We measured them by our standards, by the logical progression of civilizations we had encountered before. Humans do not follow logical progression." He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The image showed New Geneva, a human colony established on a harsh desert planet in the outer rim. From orbit, it appeared unremarkable. Scattered settlements connected by primitive transportation networks, industrial complexes that seemed decades behind Federation technology. "New Geneva was selected as our first target because it appeared defenseless," Vexathari continued. "Intelligence reports suggested a population of approximately 2 million humans, mostly miners and agricultural workers. No significant military installations, no orbital defense platforms, no energy shields protecting the major population centers." A murmur of confusion rippled through the council. If the target had been so vulnerable, how had the engagement gone wrong? "Our battle fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 47 escort vessels, and a full invasion force of 100,000 troops," Vexathari said, his voice growing quieter as painful memories surfaced. "By every tactical calculation, New Geneva should have surrendered within hours of our arrival." The holographic display shifted to show Federation warships dropping out of hyperspace above the human colony. The vessels were magnificent examples of advanced engineering, sleek, powerful craft that had conquered dozens of worlds across the outer rim. "The initial phase proceeded according to plan," Vexathari explained. "We transmitted surrender demands in 17 different languages, including their primitive human dialects. We gave them 12 hours to evacuate military personnel and prepare for occupation. Standard procedure for dealing with lesser species." Counselor Zethkar nodded approvingly. The Federation prided itself on civilized conquest. Quick, efficient takeovers that minimized casualties and preserved infrastructure for future integration into their empire. "Then the humans responded," Vexathari said, and something in his tone made the chamber fall completely silent. The holographic display showed a simple transmission from the planet's surface. A human female, elderly by their species' standards, appeared on screen. She wore simple clothing and stood in what appeared to be the colony's main administrative building. "I am Governor Sarah Chen of New Geneva," the human had said, her voice calm and steady. "We have received your surrender demands. Our response is as follows. Come and take it." Several council members chittered with amusement. The defiance seemed almost comically futile. "We interpreted this as typical primitive posturing," Vexthari continued. "Many species make similar declarations before accepting the inevitable. We proceeded with standard orbital bombardment of military targets to demonstrate our superior firepower." The display showed Federation warships unleashing precise energy strikes against the colony's small military installations. Explosions bloomed across the planet's surface as communication arrays, vehicle depots, and weapons storage facilities were systematically destroyed. "The bombardment was successful," Vexathari said. "We eliminated every identified military target within 6 hours. Long-range sensors detected no remaining organized resistance. The planet appeared ready for invasion." He paused, his scarred features reflecting something that might have been fear. "That was when we learned our first lesson about humans. They do not consider the destruction of military installations to be the end of resistance. For them, it is merely the beginning." The holographic display shifted to show the Federation landing craft descending toward New Geneva's primary settlement. Thousands of troops in advanced combat armor poured out of the transports, expecting to encounter scattered groups of demoralized civilians. Instead, they found empty streets. The entire population had vanished, Vexathari explained. 2 million humans gone without a trace. Our sensors detected no mass exodus, no ships leaving the planet, no underground bunkers large enough to hide such numbers. They had simply disappeared. The Federation troops had methodically searched every building, every tunnel, every possible hiding place. They found evidence of recent habitation, warm meals left unfinished, personal belongings scattered about, children's toys abandoned in playgrounds, but no humans. Our field commanders assumed the population had fled to remote regions of the planet, Vexthari continued. We established a perimeter around the main settlement and began expanding our search patterns. This was our second mistake. The chamber's lighting seemed to dim as Vexathari accessed darker memories. The attacks began at sunset on the second day. Not attacks, really. Disappearances. Sentries would simply vanish from their posts. Patrols would fail to report back. We would find their equipment, their weapons, sometimes traces of biological matter, but no bodies. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not how military engagements were supposed to proceed. "By the 4th day, we had lost nearly 1,000 troops," Vexathari said. "Not to enemy fire, not to equipment failures, not to any explicable military action. They were simply taken. Our remaining forces were confined to increasingly smaller defensive positions, afraid to venture beyond sight of their comrades." The holographic display showed Federation troops huddled together in defensive formations, their advanced weapons trained on empty streets and abandoned buildings. The confidence and superiority they had displayed during the initial landing had evaporated, replaced by something Federation soldiers rarely experienced: terror. "Then we began receiving the transmissions," Vexathari said, his voice barely above a whisper. The display showed grainy video feeds, messages that had been broadcast directly to Federation command frequencies. The footage was dark, clearly recorded in underground locations or hidden installations, but the subjects of the recordings were unmistakably Federation soldiers. "They showed us our own troops," Vexathari continued. "Alive, unharmed, but changed. The humans were not torturing them, not interrogating them in any conventional sense. They were studying them, learning from them." The recordings showed captured Federation soldiers speaking calmly into cameras, describing their military equipment, their tactical procedures, their species' biological weaknesses. But their eyes held a distant quality, as if they were speaking from some unreachable place. "How were they compromised?" Counselor Zethkar demanded. "Federation military conditioning is designed to resist all known forms of mental influence," Vexithari's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. That is what we thought, honored counselor. But humans do not use conventional methods. They do not rely on technology or psychic manipulation. They use something far more insidious. He paused, struggling to find words for concepts that had no equivalent in Federation languages. They use hope, he said finally, and patience, and an understanding of psychology that transcends anything in our databases. They do not break their prisoners. They convince them that resistance is not only futile, but unnecessary. They make them want to cooperate. The chamber erupted in shocked chittering and whispered conversations. The idea was almost incomprehensible to species that had built their military traditions on discipline, conditioning, and unbreakable loyalty. The captured soldiers were not traitors, Vexithari insisted. They remained loyal to the Federation, maintained their core beliefs and values, but somehow the humans had convinced them that sharing information served a greater good, that cooperation would lead to better outcomes for all involved. The holographic display showed more recordings, Federation soldiers explaining their homeworlds, their families, their hopes for the future. They spoke willingly, even eagerly, as if discussing these topics with trusted friends rather than enemy captors. By the end of the first week, we realized that conventional military tactics would not succeed against humans, Vexithari continued. We requested reinforcements and authorization to use more aggressive methods. The High Command approved orbital bombardment of civilian targets. The display shifted to show Federation warships preparing for a devastating assault on New Geneva's settlements. Energy weapons capable of reducing entire cities to radioactive craters charged to full power. The bombardment never commenced, Vexithari said quietly, because that was when the humans revealed their true nature. The silence in the chamber stretched like a taut wire as Commander Vexithari prepared to continue his testimony. The council members leaned forward, their various alien features reflecting a mixture of fascination and growing unease. What they had heard so far challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, about conquest, about the nature of resistance itself. The humans revealed themselves at 0347 hours ship time, Vexithari continued, his scarred exoskeleton gleaming dully in the chamber's artificial light. Not through any grand gesture or dramatic announcement. They simply appeared. The holographic display shifted to show the Federation fleet in orbital formation above New Geneva. The massive warships hung in space like predatory insects, their weapons arrays trained on the planet below. Then, without warning, the tactical display began showing new contacts. Ships, Vexithari explained, though the word seemed inadequate for what appeared on screen. But not ships as we understand them. Human vessels emerging from the asteroid belt, from the gas giant's shadow, from sensor blind spots we didn't even know existed. The Federation fleet had numbered 60 vessels, from escort frigates to massive dreadnoughts. The human force that materialized around them numbered in the hundreds, but these were not the crude, primitive craft that Federation intelligence had predicted. They had been watching us, Vexithari said, his voice carrying a note of profound respect mixed with terror. Not just during our approach to New Geneva, but for months before we even knew humans existed. Their ships incorporated technology we had never seen. Stealth systems that could hide entire fleets, propulsion methods that defied our understanding of physics. Counselor Zethkar interrupted, her crystalline features reflecting disbelief. Commander, are you suggesting that a species that achieved spaceflight less than a century ago had developed technology superior to our own? Vexithari's four arms gestured in a complex pattern that indicated both negation and affirmation. Not superior in the traditional sense, honored counselor. Different. Human technology follows paths we never considered because their thinking operates on fundamentally alien principles. The display showed detailed scans of human vessels, To Federation eyes, they appeared almost organic, their hull configurations flowing and adaptive rather than following the geometric precision that marked advanced engineering. Weapon systems that seemed to grow from the ship's structures rather than being mounted externally. Propulsion signatures that suggested impossible efficiency rates. While we had been developing increasingly sophisticated versions of existing technologies, humans had been reimagining the basic principles of space travel, Vexthari explained. Their ships were not faster than ours in any measurable sense, but they moved through space in ways that made speed irrelevant. They could appear anywhere, disappear without trace, coordinate movements across vast distances with perfect precision. The holographic battle display began showing the engagement that followed. It was unlike anything in Federation military records, not a clash of opposing forces following predictable tactical patterns, but something that resembled a three-dimensional chess game played by a master against children. "They did not attack us," Vexthari said, his voice filled with a strange mixture of admiration and horror. "At first, we thought they were positioning for a conventional assault. Our fleet commanders prepared standard defensive formations, charged weapons systems, activated shields and countermeasures. The Federation vessels had arranged themselves according to millennia of proven military doctrine, heavy ships forming a protective shell around support vessels, escort craft screening for incoming threats, command ships positioned for optimal communication and tactical oversight. Then the humans began their demonstration," Vexthari continued. "They showed us exactly how helpless we were without firing a single shot." The display showed human ships moving through the Federation formation like dancers weaving through a crowd. They approached to point-blank range, circled individual vessels, even passed through areas that should have been protected by overlapping defensive fields. Federation weapons tried to track them but found no targets. The human ships seemed to exist in spaces between sensors, in blind spots that shouldn't have been possible. "Our targeting systems could not lock onto their vessels," Vexthari explained. "Not because of jamming or countermeasures, but because they moved through dimensions we had not learned to perceive. They existed in our space while somehow remaining outside it." Council members murmured among themselves, struggling to comprehend tactical concepts that challenged their understanding of reality itself. "For 6 hours, they demonstrated their complete superiority without causing us any harm," Vexthari said. "They disabled our weapons by removing critical components rather than destroying them. They accessed our computer systems not through hacking, but by somehow convincing our own security protocols that they belonged there. They moved through our shields as if the energy barriers were mere suggestions." The humiliation of the Federation fleet had been absolute, but it was conducted with an almost gentle precision that made it even more unsettling. No lives were lost, no ships were destroyed, but every vessel in the fleet was rendered completely defenseless within hours. When they were satisfied that we understood our situation, the human ships withdrew to a respectful distance, Vexthari continued. Then we received a communication from the surface. Governor Chen again. But this time, she was not alone. The display showed the human governor standing in what appeared to be a vast underground facility. Behind her were hundreds of Federation soldiers, the troops who had vanished during the surface operations. But they were not bound or confined. They moved freely among human personnel, working together on projects that seemed to involve both Federation and human technology. "Your people are safe, Commander Vexthari," Governor Chen had said, addressing him directly, despite the fact that Federation communication protocols should have prevented any civilian from accessing military frequencies. "They are learning, as we hope you will learn. We do not wish to be your enemies." The words had been spoken in perfect Federation standard, with nuances and inflections that indicated not just fluency, but deep cultural understanding. Governor Chen spoke like someone who had studied Federation society for decades, not someone whose species had only recently made contact with galactic civilization. We attempted to negotiate, Vexathari admitted. Standard Federation procedure when facing superior forces is to arrange terms of withdrawal. We offered to abandon our claim to New Geneva in exchange for the return of our personnel and safe passage to Federation space. Governor Chen had smiled at the offer, an expression that somehow conveyed both amusement and genuine warmth. "Commander," she had replied, "you still do not understand the situation. We are not holding your people hostage. They are here because they choose to be here. And you are not leaving because you have not yet learned what you came here to learn." The concept had been incomprehensible to Federation military thinking. Prisoners who chose to remain with their captors, soldiers who collaborated willingly with enemy forces, commanders who could not order retreat from an obviously superior opponent. "She offered to show us," Vexathari continued, "to bring our senior officers to the surface for what she called educational exchanges. I refused, naturally. Federation military doctrine prohibits fraternization with hostile forces under any circumstances." But Governor Chen had not seemed disappointed by the refusal. Instead, she had made an offer that challenged every assumption about how war should be conducted. "Very well, Commander," she had said. "We will wait. When you are ready to learn, we will teach. When you are ready to understand, we will explain. We have time." The human ships had then taken positions throughout the system, not blockading the Federation fleet, not threatening them, simply maintaining a presence that made it clear the humans were in complete control of the situation. Days passed, Vexathari recalled, then weeks. Our supplies began running low, but the humans provided everything we needed: food, water, medical supplies, even entertainment materials. They asked for nothing in return. They made no demands, issued no ultimatums, never suggested that our situation would improve if we cooperated with them. The psychological pressure had been unlike anything in Federation military manuals. Enemies were supposed to negotiate, to make threats, to provide clear options for resolution. Humans simply waited, patient as stone, while Federation commanders struggled to understand how to respond to an opponent who refused to behave like an opponent. Some of our officers began volunteering for the educational exchanges, Vexathari admitted, his mandibles clicking with what might have been shame. Not because they were coerced or converted, but because the humans had made curiosity seem more appealing than resistance. The volunteers had been taken to the surface in small groups. They returned days or weeks later, changed in ways that were subtle but profound. They remained loyal Federation soldiers, but they carried with them new perspectives that slowly spread throughout the fleet. They spoke of human cities built into the planet's crust, of technologies that seemed to grow rather than being manufactured, of social systems that somehow maintained order without rigid hierarchy, Vexathari explained. But more disturbing than their descriptions of human civilization were their reports about human psychology. The returning officers had struggled to explain what they had learned about human thinking. Humans, they reported, did not view conflict as a contest between opposing forces. They saw it as a problem to be solved, with violence being merely one tool among many, and usually not the most effective tool. They described humans who could hold contradictory ideas simultaneously without experiencing psychological stress, Vexathari said. Individuals who could be completely committed to their own survival while genuinely caring about the welfare of their enemies. Soldiers who could fight with devastating effectiveness while feeling genuine regret for the necessity of violence. These concepts had been almost impossible for Federation minds to process. Their entire military tradition was built on clear distinctions between ally and enemy, between victory and defeat, between right and wrong. Humans seemed to exist in spaces between these certainties, comfortable with ambiguity that would drive other species to madness. After 2 months in the system, I finally accepted Governor Chen's invitation, Vexathari admitted, not because I had been convinced to cooperate, but because I could no longer function as a commander without understanding what we were facing. His descent to New Geneva's surface had been unlike any military experience in his long career. The human transport that carried him was unarmed, unescorted, operated by a crew who treated him not as a captured enemy, but as an honored guest. They showed genuine interest in his welfare, asked thoughtful questions about his homeworld and his family, shared stories about their own lives with surprising openness. I expected to be taken to some sort of detention facility or interrogation center, Vexathari said. Instead, they brought me to what they called their integration complex, a vast underground city that housed not only humans, but representatives from dozens of species I had never encountered. The facility had been a revelation that challenged everything the Federation believed about galactic civilization. Humans had been making contact with alien species for far longer than their official spaceflight capabilities suggested, building relationships based on principles that seemed to transcend traditional diplomacy. I met Korthak traders who had been working with humans for over 50 years, Vexathari continued. Silicate entities from the Vagan systems who spoke of human philosophers who understood crystalline consciousness better than their own kind. Energy beings from the galactic core who collaborated with human scientists on projects that spanned centuries. The scope of human contact with galactic civilization had been staggering. While the Federation had been expanding through conquest and assimilation, humans had been building networks of cooperation and mutual benefit that stretched across unexplored regions of the galaxy. Governor Chen explained that New Geneva was not simply a mining colony, Vexathari said. It was a contact point, a place where humans studied other species and learned how to build relationships with civilizations they had not yet formally encountered. They had been studying Federation culture for decades, preparing for the contact they knew was inevitable. The realization had been humbling and terrifying. Every Federation expansion had been carefully observed, every tactical method catalogued, every cultural assumption analyzed by human observers who remained completely invisible to Federation sensors. They knew we would come, Vexathari concluded. They knew how we would attack, how we would think, how we would respond to every situation we encountered. New Geneva was not a target we had selected. It was a trap they had prepared, designed specifically to teach us lessons we did not know we needed to learn. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Vexathari's testimony sank in. The Federation's expansion across the galaxy, their military supremacy, their fundamental understanding of how civilizations interacted, all of it had been observed, analyzed, and quietly countered by a species that seemed to exist outside every framework they used to understand the universe. The weight of Commander Vexathari's revelations hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Council members exchanged nervous glances, their various alien features reflecting the growing realization that everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization was about to change forever. The Federation had built its empire on the assumption that they were the most advanced species in the galaxy, that their military might and technological superiority were unmatched. Now they faced the possibility that they had been children playing with toys while giants watched from the shadows. Councillor Zethkar's crystalline form had lost its earlier confidence. "Commander," she said carefully, "you have described capabilities that seem to exceed known physical laws. How do we know these humans are not using some form of advanced deception? Holographic projections, perhaps? Or elaborate psychological manipulation?" Vexathari's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter amusement. "Honored Counselor, I spent 3 months on New Geneva. What I experienced was not deception, but a fundamental expansion of what I believe possible. The humans did not show me illusions. They showed me reality from perspectives I had never imagined." The holographic display shifted to show detailed recordings from Vexathari's time on the human world. The integration complex was vast beyond comprehension, stretching through natural caverns and constructed spaces that seemed to blend seamlessly with the planet's geology. But it was not the size that impressed. It was the diversity. I witnessed technologies that seemed to violate everything we know about physics, Vexithari continued. But when human scientists explained their principles, the violations became revelations. They had not broken the laws of nature. They had discovered laws we didn't know existed. The display showed laboratories where human researchers worked alongside beings that defied classification. Entities that existed as pure thought interacted with mechanical constructs that seemed to possess genuine consciousness. Biological forms that appeared to be living starships communicated with energy patterns that might have been sentient mathematics. The humans have made contact with forms of intelligence we never considered possible, Vexithari explained. Species that exist in dimensions we cannot perceive, civilizations that experience time differently than we do, collective consciousness entities that span multiple star systems, and somehow they have learned to communicate with all of them. The implications were staggering. If humans could interact with intelligences beyond conventional understanding, then their apparent technological achievements might represent collaborative efforts spanning scales of existence that dwarfed anything the Federation had encountered. Governor Chen introduced me to what she called the collective archive, Vexithari said, his voice carrying a note of reverence that seemed inappropriate for a military report. It was not a database or library in any sense we would recognize, but a living repository of knowledge that encompassed the experiences and wisdom of thousands of species across millions of years. The display showed what appeared to be a vast organic structure, its walls pulsing with patterns of light that seemed to respond to the presence of observers. Humans moved through the space with easy familiarity, but their alien guests approached with the careful respect due to something sacred. The archive knew me, Vexithari continued. Not just my name or my species, but my thoughts, my fears, my deepest convictions about duty and honor and the nature of existence itself. It spoke to me in my own voice, using concepts from my homeworld's philosophy that no human should have known. The experience had been transformative in ways that Federation psychological conditioning had never prepared him for. The archive had not attacked his beliefs or tried to convert him to human ways of thinking. Instead, it had shown him how his own convictions connected to broader patterns of meaning that transcended species boundaries. I learned that the Federation's expansion across the galaxy was not unique, Vexithari said. Thousands of civilizations had followed similar paths: conquest, assimilation, the belief that their way of life represented the ultimate achievement of intelligence. The archive contained the complete histories of hundreds of such empires. Every one of them had eventually encountered limitations that forced them to evolve beyond conquest or face extinction. Some had learned to adapt, transforming from military empires into collaborative networks. Others had persisted in their aggressive expansion until they triggered conflicts that consumed entire regions of the galaxy. The humans showed me recordings of species that had faced the same choice we now face, Vexithari continued, the hegemony of worlds, which ruled 60 systems before encountering entities that existed outside normal space-time. The Crystal Empire, whose perfected technology could not defend against opponents who attacked through dimensions they couldn't perceive. The Machine Collective, whose computational superiority became irrelevant when faced with intelligences that operated beyond logical frameworks. Each example followed similar patterns. Advanced civilizations encountered forms of intelligence that transcended their understanding, forcing them to choose between adaptation and destruction. Some chose wisely and survived to become part of larger cooperative networks. Others chose to fight and were eventually absorbed by forces they could not comprehend. The humans are not conquerors, Vexithari said, his voice filled with certainty that seemed to surprise even him. "They are gardeners, cultivating the growth of intelligence throughout the galaxy. They guide younger civilizations through the transitions necessary to join the broader community of conscious beings." Counselor Zethkar leaned forward aggressively. "Commander, you speak as if you have been converted to some sort of human ideology. Are you still capable of objective military assessment?" Vexathari's scarred exoskeleton straightened with dignity. "I remain a loyal Federation officer, honored counselor. But loyalty includes the responsibility to provide accurate intelligence, even when that intelligence challenges our fundamental assumptions. The humans are not our enemies, they are our teachers, and we have much to learn." The display shifted to show the final phase of Vexathari's time on New Geneva. Governor Chen had brought him to a vast observatory, where human astronomers worked with beings whose forms seemed to shift between matter and energy. Together, they monitored activities across the galaxy, with instruments that detected patterns invisible to Federation sensors. "They showed me the true scope of galactic civilization," Vexathari explained. "What we call the unexplored regions are actually home to countless species and intelligences. The humans have been in contact with most of them for centuries, building relationships and facilitating communication between groups that would otherwise never meet. The Federation's expansion had been taking place in what amounted to a cosmic nursery, watched over by intelligences so advanced that their presence remained invisible to conventional detection methods. Every Federation conquest, every technological development, every cultural evolution had been observed and catalogued by observers who remained completely hidden. The humans offered us a choice," Vexathari said. "We could continue our expansion using conventional methods, eventually encountering limitations that would force us to adapt or be destroyed. Or we could begin that adaptation now, while we still have the strength and flexibility to guide our own transformation." The offer had not been presented as an ultimatum or a demand. Governor Chen had simply explained the options available to the Federation, the potential consequences of each choice, and the resources that humans and their allies could provide to support whatever decision the Federation made. "They asked for nothing in return," Vexathari continued. "No tribute, no territory, no acknowledgement of human superiority. They offered to share knowledge and resources freely, with no expectation beyond our commitment to peaceful development." The concept had been almost incomprehensible to Federation thinking. Military assistance without conquest, technological exchange without domination, cooperation without submission. These ideas existed outside every framework the Federation used to understand interspecies relations. I asked Governor Chen why humans were willing to help potential enemies, Vexathari recalled. Her answer changed my understanding of what intelligence could achieve when properly focused. The human governor had explained that consciousness itself was precious beyond any material consideration. Every species that achieved sentience represented a unique perspective on existence, a way of understanding reality that could never be replicated. When civilizations destroyed each other through conflict, the universe lost irreplaceable treasures that could never be recovered. Humans see diversity of thought as the most valuable resource in the galaxy, Vexathari said. They believe that every species has contributions to make to the broader understanding of existence. They help others not from altruism, but because they know that a richer, more diverse galactic civilization benefits everyone. The philosophy represented a complete inversion of Federation thinking. Where the Federation sought to impose order through standardization and control, humans sought to create harmony through diversity and cooperation. Both approaches had their merits, but only one had proven capable of building relationships that spanned dimensions and transcended conventional understanding of reality. When I returned to the fleet, I found that our situation had changed, Vexathari continued. The human ships were gone. No blockade, no threats, no conditions for our departure. We were free to leave New Geneva whenever we chose. But freedom to leave had not eliminated the fundamental problem. The Federation fleet no longer had any idea how to proceed. Their mission to conquer New Geneva had become meaningless, but they had no framework for understanding what should replace it. Nearly half our personnel had participated in the educational exchanges, Vexthari admitted. They returned with knowledge that transformed their understanding of our place in the galaxy, but they also returned with questions that our military doctrine could not answer. The volunteers brought back reports of human technologies that could revolutionize Federation science, social systems that could eliminate many of the problems that plagued Federation worlds, philosophical insights that could guide the development of more effective governance. But accepting these gifts would require acknowledging that the Federation's expansion through conquest was not the pinnacle of civilizational development. I made the decision to return to Federation space, Vexthari said, but not to report a military defeat. We had not been defeated. We had been educated. The question now is whether the Federation has the wisdom to learn from that education. Counselor Zethkar's crystalline features reflected deep uncertainty. Commander, are you recommending that the Federation abandon its expansion policies and accept human guidance? Vexthari's forearms moved in a gesture that encompassed both negation and affirmation. I am recommending that the Federation recognize the reality of our situation, honored Counselor. We are not the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We are not even close. But the civilizations that surpass us are willing to help us grow beyond our current limitations, if we have the courage to accept that growth. The chamber fell silent as council members struggled to process the implications of Vexthari's testimony. Everything they had believed about Federation superiority, about the nature of galactic civilization, about the ultimate goals of intelligent species, all of it would need to be reconsidered in light of what he had reported. The humans gave me a message for the High Council, Vexthari concluded. They said that the Federation stands at a crossroads that every expanding civilization eventually reaches. We can choose to continue our current path and eventually face the same limitations that have challenged countless species before us, or we can choose to begin our transformation now, while we still control the pace and direction of that change. He activated a final holographic display, a star map showing the galaxy from a perspective no Federation astronomer had ever seen. Vast networks of communication and cooperation connected thousands of worlds, creating patterns of interaction that spanned the entire galactic disk. The Federation's territory appeared as a small, isolated cluster on the rim of this vast community. They are waiting for our answer, Vexthari said, not as conquerors or judges, but as teachers who understand the challenges we face because they have faced them themselves. The choice is ours to make, but we should make it with full knowledge of what we are choosing between. As the holographic display faded, leaving the chamber in relative darkness, council members sat in stunned silence. They had expected to hear about a military defeat, about tactical errors and strategic miscalculations. Instead, they had learned that their entire understanding of reality was fundamentally flawed. The Federation would never be the same. Whether they chose to accept human guidance or continue their expansion through conquest, they could no longer pretend to be unaware of the larger community of consciousness that surrounded them. The age of innocent imperialism was over, and the age of conscious choice had begun. In the growing darkness of the chamber, Commander Vexthari waited for questions that might help his leaders understand the magnitude of the decision they faced. But the silence stretched on, filled with the weight of revelations that would reshape the galaxy forever. The humans had been right about one thing. They were indeed nightmares for any civilization that believed itself to be the pinnacle of achievement. But they were nightmares that offered awakening rather than destruction, growth rather than conquest, transformation rather than defeat. The question was whether the Federation would have the courage to wake up.